Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So for today I'm going to do my February wrap up, but I'm also going to cheat and include January in there since I started this journey last month. So I do sound a little nasally, so bear with me. I am sick, but sickness equals free time for me. So I'm going to just push through and talk about books because you can never be too sick to talk about some good books. Oh. All right, so I also have my journal here because I'm going to be referencing what I read from here. This is actually the journal from A Clockwork Reader, which I like to watch her sometimes, and she launched this journal, keep track of everything you read, and like it has little prompts in it, which I really like. So I'll put a link to it in the description if you're interested and looking for a journal. So it looks like this pretty much, and it's really cute. Like she decorated it with, I think she like hand drew this and then they ended up pressing it as a journal, I think. But it's really nice because it has like little like you could keep track of everything you're reading this way. So it's like the title, the author, how many pages, the genre. It's like, what is your favorite quote? Where were you when you were reading this book? What is the most memorable scene? Would you recommend this book? Why? And what did you learn from this book? So I kind of like that because I can always kind of reference my reads this way. And it's like, since I don't always have a lot of time, I love how this is a way that I can just keep track of it and kind of get a glimpse of like, oh, okay, yeah, now I remember, like that's what it was about, if it wasn't like the most memorable, book. So anywho, let's begin. Okay, so these were either audiobooks on my Kindle or physical books. So I only have 2 physical books, and then the rest were audiobook and on my Kindle. So how many did I read in total? Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so it's only 6. All right, so the first one, I'll just put up the picture if it was an audiobook, was Pack Up the Moon by Kristen Higgins. Kristen Higgins, yeah, I believe that's how you say it. So this one, I was listening to it on the audiobook. What I liked about it was that you had the dual POV. So on the audiobook, they also changed the voices. So they had like different narrators. And it was just basically about this woman that she has like a chronic illness, and the husband, he is like all about his wife. He's completely in love, as it should be. So when she gets the diagnosis and you kind of just like see them living their lives, and she recognizes and kind of accepts that this will be the end for her, he's kind of just like going crazy in a way. But she starts writing these letters to him so that he'll have when she passes, and there's a person that she designates to give him a letter every month after her passing. And then he's just like, you see his journey basically after his wife's passing, and you are with him as he reads those letters. He's recounting memories. He explains everything that's happening in the moment. That's pretty much the premise of the book without giving away too much of it. So this was a fiction romance book, heavy on the romance, obviously. And I just gave it a 2-star because it just like didn't hit for me. I don't know if my expectations were too high from the beginning, because I listened to YouTubers that they rated this very highly, and they were like, oh, I cried. So I really wanted to cry. I'm like, I need a book that's gonna make me cry, because I haven't really experienced that. I only experienced that one time, and it was like a self-help book of me recounting my own stuff, which I'll talk about, but nothing like from fictional characters moving me that heavily. So I don't know if I just went into it with too high expectations, but yeah, I just rated it a 2 stars. It just didn't, it was cute, but I I didn't really love it, and I think that's okay. So didn't start off strong in January. I think it'll be fun to show like or to share my favorite quotes. So from here, I put that my favorite quote in the book was, "Staying in the moment was better than wringing hands about the future." And I think that just speaks to like, you know, being present in the moment all the time and not always being fixated on the future, because if you're always fixated on the future and what's going to happen or what you need to do, then you lose what's happening in the here and now. So that's why I really loved that quote. So the next one, we're gonna do a 360 real quick. So I read The Silent Patient on my Kindle, my emotional support Kindle. Love you, girl. So I read The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, but girl, what? 5 stars. Like 5 stars, period. 5 stars. Like, no, so this brought the cliffhangers, this brought the mystery. But let me rewind actually. So this is a psychological thriller. This was my first ever psychological thriller, and I was psychologically thrilled. Like, it just gave what he was intending to give. Like, it was everything. There were so many twists and turns. I love when I think I know what's going to happen, or I'm like, oh, that's the person, or that's, I'm talking about like in movies, right? Because this is my first time reading a psychological thriller. But like in movies, when I'm like, oh, I know this is gonna happen, or I know it's that person, anytime I thought something, it was the opposite, or like it wasn't it. And I was like, wow. So he really did a great job of like keeping you on your toes. So it's basically, the premise is this woman that she, right off the bat, you know that her husband was murdered. After the murder of her husband, she has yet to speak. So she's just literally a silent patient. She hasn't spoken ever since that day. So the main character, Theo, in the book, or one of the main characters, I guess I should say, he's the therapist that's working with her. And I don't know, see, I'm still new to this, so I don't know how much is too much to give. So I think I'm gonna do less, just so I don't spoil it in case you do want to read it on your own. But yeah, Theo's a therapist, and he's basically just helping her through, you know, the trauma that she experienced and speaking out about what happened. And then we also get Alicia. Alicia is the silent patient, that's her name, and we get her perspective through her journal entries. So yeah, I think that's all I should say because it was so good. Okay, so I'm gonna share my quotes that I liked. So we already know I gave it 5 stars. It's a psychological thriller. So my favorite quote was, "Expressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways." That's a quote by Sigmund Freud that the author used. And yeah, I think that quote spoke to me because that is so true, right? Like, that's why people are always encouraged to speak about their emotions, because if you just keep burying it and burying it, did this just become a counseling session? Like, what? No, but if you keep burying your feelings, right, and your emotions, they are going to come to the surface in usually not the best ways, according to Sigmund Freud. And I'm sure I personally seen it. I'm sure, you know, people have experienced that truth. Also, this author, I was reading like a quick background, I think, about him, and he was like, I think he mentioned he was in the field of counseling. I don't know if he said he was a therapist or psychologist. So I thought that his background was perfect to write this book, because he did bring in like that therapeutic perspective to the book. So I think that's why I made it so much more like amazing. So yeah, that was definitely a 5 stars. Like, if there's any book that I can recommend out of this video, it would be The Silent Patient. And I was so late to it because I think that book came out a while ago. So I'm glad that I got to experience it, because that's gonna be a memorable one for me. So the next book that I read was a memoir. So this one is The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. And this one I listened to the audiobook. It was not Britney that narrated the audiobook. She did a snippet in the beginning, and she mentioned how like this, because it's her real life experiences, it was just too difficult for her to basically speak about. So I actually appreciate how she popped up in the beginning and mentioned that, and then the actual narrator told the story, which is fine. It was still amazing. So I gave this book a 5-star. It just recounts Britney's life story from when she was very little. She tells us how she came about liking, you know, music, and then her journey as an artist. And I just really appreciated like her transparency. And I've always been a Britney fan, so reading this, so first of all, back then when she was doing, I remember there was a big wave that everyone was like, oh, she's crazy, like she shaved her head, and it was all this stuff. But I was younger, so I couldn't really understand. Like if that was happening now at the age that I am and what I know, I would have processed that information differently probably. But nonetheless, she experienced that. And I just remember feeling like so bad for her, but I didn't understand. I'm like, why did she do that? But I'm like, oh my gosh, she's sad. Like she's so sad. But why? Like why is she shaving her head? You know, so it was very confusing, but also like had empathy for her. So reading this, I was able to connect the dots, like, oh wow, okay, like this is why she did this, you know. And again, this speaks about mental health a lot. Like she was dealing with so many things that her family did to her too that was not cool. And when you see clips of her back in the day, like you would have never knew that she was experiencing this. Like I think she's such a strong individual and such a strong woman for everything that she's endured, like for real. So yeah, I give this one a 5-star, especially if you like Britney Spears or you were a fan of her music. Like I think it would just be awesome to read this or pick this one up. So yeah, memoir, 5 stars, faux show. And a quote that I really liked was, if no one is used to you being assertive, they get freaked out when you start speaking your mind. And I was like, you right, girl, you right. Because people love to take advantage of individuals that are passive, and Britney Spears, although I don't know her personally, she very much gives that energy of like she's more passive, more calm, you know, seems like a people pleaser. And you definitely get that by reading her book. So I love when she took the turn and she started putting her foot down and really doing things for herself, like, you know, standing up for herself, advocating for herself. So that was dope, and I really liked that particular quote. The next book that I listened to was another memoir. I love memoirs nowadays, I don't know why. But this one was I Can't Make This Up by Kevin Hart and Neil Strauss. I think I said his last name right. So this is gonna be biased because I love Kevin Hart. Like I'm a Kevin Hart fan. I don't agree with all of his decisions that he's made, but I just think he's just like the funniest comedian in my opinion. So absolutely am a fan of him and his, you know, work. So he did narrate this book, which I think was so dope because he just added like such a great element, because he inserted parts, apparently, allegedly, because I don't have the physical book, I just listened to the audiobook, but allegedly he based on Goodreads reviews, he inserted parts that weren't physically written. So some people didn't like that aspect of it. They're like, yo, like follow the book, don't just include random commentary here and there. But I think that just adds to it, right? Because it's his story, like it's his memoir. So if he wants to just like add some commentary here and there. I don't think I'm mad at it, but again, I didn't experience it in that way. Like, you know, I didn't like immerse myself in the book with the audio. I just had the audio. So, but anyways, I feel like I could tell, because I read books, like I can tell when he was going off the scripts, and sometimes he literally said, okay, back to the book kind of thing. So like back to like what I'm actually supposed to be reading. But I actually enjoyed that. I think it added an element of like just being genuine. That's him. And I think it showed through the audiobook, and I actually really love that. So this book, obviously it's another memoir, so it was just about his life, recounting his childhood, which I thought was so interesting because I didn't know about it. I've heard about his childhood through his comedy and about his dad, which I think is so funny, but I've never known like to take truth to those statements that he was saying on stage. You know, I'm like, I don't know if he's exaggerating things to be funny or what have you, but he basically states how his parents didn't have the most healthiest relationship, you know, so he never really had a healthy relationship to go off of and look up to. His mom was like a real one. She raised him, I think, so right. And, you know, he talks about his dad being in and out his life. Then he talks about the steps that he took to get to where he's at, you know, when he was like pretty much like a no one, trying to make a name for himself. He also mentions about his his relationship with his first wife. And yeah, so it was just like very real. I think he was just very real. And because I like him so much as a comedian, I just loved to know the real him through his story. So I gave this book a 4 stars. The reason why I didn't give it 5 stars, I feel, is because I think it got to a point where it was just like too much information. Like it could have been a shorter book, in my opinion. Like when he starts talking about experiences as he was trying to make it, you know, as a big star in Hollywood, I think he gave us too many you know, examples or scenarios that happened in his life where it was like, okay, we get it, you know, like I get the message that you were trying to send, so we could have just like made it a little bit shorter. And that's coming from someone that absolutely loves him. So yeah, for that I gave him 4 stars, because at that part he was kind of losing me. Like I was getting a little bored, because I'm like, okay, this is sounding, these events that you're having in Hollywood are sounding redundant, and we could just like cut some of them out. So for that I gave it 4 stars. But nonetheless, I totally recommend it, especially obviously if you're a Kevin Hart fan, or if you like some good storytelling. Definitely would get the audiobook and just listen to his life. And I think he does offer a lot of it is kind of generic, you know, lessons that we have heard or hear, but I think the fact that he backs it up with the experience he had, and he's sharing why he's giving us this particular advice, I really enjoyed it. So I still got stuff out of the book for my own personal life where I'm like, oh wow, maybe, you know, I could apply this to my life, even though it was generic, but just seeing how he used it in his life, I think is meaningful and worked for this book. So let me share my quotes. So my favorite quote is, you can't choose what happens to you, but you can choose how to interpret it. Now I know if that ain't the truth. So this is just facts. Like, you know, things happen to you and you determine how you're going to experience that. You know, like you can make it a learning experience, you can become depressed over it and it ruins your life. Like, you know, it just, that is so true, that like it could be a shitty situation, it could be a good situation, but whatever happens to you, you choose how to take in that information and how it's gonna impact your life. So that was like such a real one. He also shared another quote that I liked. It says, the things that I hated most as a child are the things that serve me as an adult. So I resonated with that. And I feel like a lot of people probably could, because things that his mom in particular that made him do, it was funny because of, he like remained obedient through it too, which I think is awesome. But yeah, like, you know, a lot of times things that my mom made me do growing up, I'm like, ugh, like I hated it. But in hindsight, it actually helped me in adulthood and be, you know, the person that I am. So yeah, again, kind of generic, but totally useful. And sometimes you need someone to just hit you with a quote for you to be like, dang, you right. Like, you know? So yeah, definitely recommend that one. Okay, so for the next book, so this one was a hard copy. Sorry, I keep going, but I feel sick. And hopefully I don't look as bad as I sound. Okay, so the next one is this book, Love Your Kids Without Losing Yourself by Morgan Cutlip. So clearly, like, I tabbed this book so much. So when I said before a book that made you cry, this book deadass, oh, should I say that? This book seriously made me cry, and I'll tell you why. So this book, just to give you a background, obviously it's a self-help book geared to moms, and it just like explains, you know, the difficulties of motherhood and how we can fall short in taking care of ourselves, which can then transfer to the way we react and care for our kids. Like, it was just very real. Morgan inserts part of her own life, like she gives her real examples being a wife and a mother, which I really appreciated. And there's just honestly so much in this book, because it also gives you resources, it gives you outlines. Like, it's really meant for you to practice and reference back to continue practicing. So I like to think I'm good at summarizing books, but again, like, this book just had so many elements to it. So I'm just gonna say like what I mainly took from it. It basically makes you look into your own life and reflect on your upbringing and things that are meaningful to you. And then she tries to make you connect it to the behaviors that you're expressing now, or things that you may be feeling. So it just hit home for me, because I had to do my own, you know, self work or shadow work, as some therapists like to call it. But that shadow work, meaning it's not something that you're consciously thinking about, it's something in your unconscious mind that's affecting your behaviors and the way that you know, interact with life, people, and what have you. So that was just like, dang, like, you know, I was just like reflecting, because we all have our own work that we have to do. So that was the part that made me like a little emotional, like, oh wow, like this is why I do this thing because of that, like, and just like connecting those pieces was kind of emotional. But yeah, so a big part of her message too is like, hey, you're not a bad mom. Like, just because you had a bad day doesn't mean you're a bad mom. So she does a lot of like, you know, zoom out. Like, don't zoom in on whatever that one thing is that you think made you a bad mom. Zoom out, look at the bigger picture. Like, all in all, what do you do? Like, you know, are you constantly catering for your kids' needs in the way that you can, or in the best way that you know you can, you know? So I just loved that message and everything that came with the book, because it's basically a book that's telling you, hey, you're doing the best that you can and you're not a bad mom. And like, you know, and I love that, because I feel like moms fixate on how they're bad moms, but you know, you don't really think about how you're such a good mom. And especially when your kid starts to talk, like right now, my toddler's at the stage where he's like, he has told me a couple times, like, you're a bad mom. And he says that, like, because he's not getting whatever he wants or whatever. So, you know, you can internalize that and be like, dang, like, I am a bad mom. But, like, you know, and he's a toddler and they don't know how to manage their feelings. But we're adults. Like, we need to know how to manage our feelings. So, you know, and then 30 minutes later, he'll be like, oh my God, you're the best mom in the world. So that's why I'm saying, like, manage your emotions, because I can't have these big feelings to whatever thing he feels in that moment. Because it's just gonna cause me, it's gonna be detrimental to my mental health. And I also need to model appropriate responses for him, you know? Ooh, I feel very sick. Okay. So again, this was a parenting or self-help book. I gave this 5 stars because, again, there was a lot of realness, a lot of truth to this. It was definitely things that I can implement in my life as a mother. So I'm going to share some of my favorite quotes. I have one favorite quote and something else I'm going to mention. So a quote that she says that I like is, take comfort in knowing that defining your experience is freeing in so many ways, and know that if you can't do anything else, you can change the way you think about yourself and your circumstance. So that first part is like, she does mention a lot, like, to kind of stop. I don't know if you guys ever played The Sims, but you know when your levels are a certain way, so your hygiene is like, oh, I need to take a shower, so your hygiene may be low, or like, I don't know, your emotions for love or something, maybe, whatever. So she's like, basically you analyzing and identifying, like, okay, wow, taking that moment, being like, I'm overwhelmed right now. And right now, what would make me less overwhelmed is if I can just take 30 minutes to myself to read, or take 30 minutes to myself to take a shower and whatever, what have you, you know, those are just examples. But basically, apparently this thing has a recording limit. I didn't even know that. Okay, so yeah, so she basically says that, you know, she says a lot of things, but something she says too is like, don't be afraid to ask for help, you know, make sure your cup is full, because if your cup is full and you're not taking care of yourself, then you cannot take care of other people. You cannot take care of your husband, you cannot take care of your kids, and you cannot attend to other people's needs if your needs are not met, period. So she says that. So that's what she says, like, you saying to yourself and acknowledging what you need is in itself a freeing experience, right? Like, I'm acting this way. Maybe you're not acting, you're acting out of character and you're like screaming at your 2-year-old or something, like, okay, that's something real that people experience. Or you're screaming at your teenager, whatever it is. And that's not usually you. So you just taking a step back and analyzing what it is that you need is in itself is a freeing experience, right? Oh, my battery's blinking. That's not a good sign. Okay. So, and then that last part reminds me of the Kevin Hart book, because it's like, you can change the way you think about yourself. So don't think about yourself as a bad mom, right? Like, just think about yourself as someone that's trying the best that you can. Or if you're having a rough patch, think about yourself as someone that's just going through a rough time, you know? And you can, a lot of it is to how we internalize things, right? Like, if your child is fussing about something, you could be like, oh my God, I hate my life, I hate this, I hate that, this kid never listens. Or you could just be like, wow, you know, this kid is having a hard time right now. I can either, like, if you feel like you're gonna act out of character, just walk away, let them have their moment, you have your moment, you know, take a couple minutes to reground yourself and then reapproach that situation. But the point of it is like, don't, you know, don't take your experiences that are bad as negative ones, because it's just gonna affect you mentally and worse, right? So that's what I took from it, and I think it was very helpful. Also, another thing that's worth mentioning, I think, is she talks about having a mantra. So the mantra is to ground yourself whenever you have these feelings of like, oh, I'm a bad mom, or, you know, my kid is acting out, so I must be raising him bad. Whatever like negative thoughts that may be going through your head. So she mentions how her friend has a mantra, if I'm remembering correctly. She says like, her friend says, as long as my kids know that I want them in my life, I'm a good mom. Like that was her mantra for whatever reason. And she holds truth to that mantra. So I'll share my mantra. I created one. So mine, I'm saying, and again, this isn't like working overnight, right? Like this is like, you have to practice this. And I'm not gonna say I'm the best at this. So like when my kids act crazy, I'm just like, my mantra is. But the point is like you've set one for yourself and you know that you intend to use it whenever, you know, you're in an undesirable situation. So my mantra is, as long as my children are heard and I am compassionate of their feelings, I am being a good mother. So I feel like for me, because I feel like that grounds me, because I feel that I like to think of myself, or I try to aspire to be. All right, my camera's being very disrespectful. It cut off. I have a little charge left. So yeah, okay, I wanted this video to be quicker. It's not giving quick. But in the comments, actually, let me know if you guys like listening to like longer book reviews, or you like people when they just get straight to the point. I'm curious. I personally like listening to longer ones, but so yeah, basically the point of that is, I was talking about the mantra, her mantra, or creating a mantra, and that's my mantra because it grounds me to like the person that I aspire or wish to be, or person I like to think that I am, a person that listens to people and receives them with empathy, no judgment, right? So I like to offer that to my children. So that's why I say that, okay, if I'm feeling kind of like a shitty mom today, did I hear my kids out and did I basically approach their feelings with compassion? Then I feel like I'm doing the best that I can as a mom. So that's my mantra. So I really like that. That stood out to me, and just with that in itself, that's just like a little blurb part of the book, but I think I took so much from that part of the book because it's something that you can actively practice mentally, and you don't have to physically write anything down. It's just something that you're constantly telling yourself. And yeah, and I feel like having that mantra is probably good for like any other thing, like for being a good friend, for being a good wife, for being a good daughter or son, whatever, like, you know. So I thought that was pretty cool, and I really loved that part. So yeah, highly recommend, 5 stars. Really would recommend if you're a parent, most specifically a mom. Okay, so the last book to wrap this up is going to be the last physical copy that I read, which was Educated by Tara Westover. Man, oh man. So this is another memoir. I was definitely in my memoir self-help bag these 2 months. So this book is, again, a memoir about Tara's life, the author, and a synopsis about it is basically that she is she takes us on a journey explaining her upbringing as a child all the way into her adulthood. And I really like this because it was a totally different perspective of how I grew up. She mentions how she was brought up as a Mormon, and her parents didn't believe in the government being like integrating as a member of society, basically in the way that we know how to do that, getting a birth certificate, social security number. Like her parents just did not believe in that. And her family also didn't believe the public education system, so she was not educated in schools. She was just homeschooled, and even that is saying loosely because it wasn't something that they had a specific standard to, and it's not like the vibe that she gave was like basically her mom gave up at a certain time. But she was actively watching her mom be a midwife. Her mom just learned watching someone else do it. You know, she watched her dad be kind of like a construction worker. Like, you know, he would like fix up the house, do things outside, like I don't know why I can't find the words, but he was basically like always building things, fixing things, right? So she did see her parents working. It just wasn't how we see it in society, really, like how you see your parents go to a 9 to 5, that kind of thing. Like, it wasn't like that. They were basically entrepreneurs, if you want to say that. So yeah, throughout the book you just see like the extremes that her parents' beliefs are and how that kind of affects her in her life. And then she goes on to pursue education herself. She goes to college. She actually becomes, you know, educated and successful. But man, her story is quite something to read. Like, it just puts so many things in perspective about like man, oh man, my camera just keeps dying. So the last book I was talking about is Educated by Tara Westover. So like I had mentioned, she is going through this journey of not being as a member of society. Basically, her upbringing is totally different than what the average person can imagine. Her dad did a lot of things in the name of religion and his spirituality and God, but to like very extreme levels, I would say. But yeah, nonetheless, it was such a great book. And it also brought up a lot of questions and themes about like family, right? Like, to what extent do we allow our family to control us? Can our family hinder us? You know, so her family was never really in agreement with her obtaining an education in the way that she wanted to. They were like, oh, this is kind of like, this is blasphemy. The government is diabolical. They're the devil. Like, you should not. So that's what I mean when I say extreme. So she also experienced like abuse, like physical, from family members. I don't want to like spoil it, but yeah, it was just, she really endured a lot. And just to see, you know, the way that she came out from that childhood and her journey is just amazing. So I highly recommend. I did rate that book 5 stars. I think it's so interesting and kind of like important. It is an important book to just have an ongoing discussion about. So yeah, so a quote that I liked was, what is a person to do, I asked, when their obligation to their family conflict with other obligations, to friends, to society, to themselves? And that is a quote that speaks to like something that's ongoing in the book, because she's constantly like drawn to what her like fulfilling the life that her family sees and wants for her, and versus, you know, fulfilling and pursuing the life that she wants and sees for herself. So that's something really hard to grapple with, because our family has a huge influence on us. So the fact that she went through that conflict was crazy to read about. Also, I put that I like the quote, you could call this selfhood many things: transformation, metamorphosis, falsity, betrayal. I call it an education. So that's how she ended the book, and I just think she ended it like bam, boss. Like, I just loved it, because it just speaks to like how she chose herself. And it's like, okay, I chose myself at the end of the day. You call it what you will. Call it a transformation, call it selfhood, call it, you know, betrayal to my family, but I just call it being educated. And I thought that was so awesome, because it's like, at the end of the day, she does emphasize to like how much being educated helps us make decisions for ourselves, like helps us see things with clarity. So I just like really enjoyed this book. I think this book was so dope. So all in all, honestly, I had a great reading month in January and February. I don't get to read as fast as I would like, or consume as many books as I would like to, because of my day-to-day life responsibilities, but hopefully I can continue putting these wrap-ups out, and just, even if I read 2 books, maybe I could talk about it. Y'all cool with it? Y'all cool with it? So yeah, but thank you so much for sticking through this entire video. If you did, if you didn't, I'm glad you clicked on it anyways. And have an amazing day, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.